Hello to all the amazing viewers of Hoai Ca. Previously, Hung's mother tried her best to come clean and tell him the truth she's been hiding for years. But the pain of the past was just too much for Hung to accept. He turned away, leaving his mother with nothing but heartbreak. Everything seemed completely shut down until Man showed up at the cafe. Just one sentence from him, short but sharp like a knife, hit Hung so hard that he almost collapsed from a heart attack right there. And in that moment, everything Hung thought he knew about his mother started to fall apart. What exactly did his mother sacrifice for Hung and Hoai Ca? Was the truth he has been rejecting, not what he believed at all? Watch until the end to find out what Man told Hung that brought him to tears in the middle of the cafe. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you can follow us as we uncover the truth behind this heartbreaking story. After the painful encounter with his mother, Hung returned home feeling like someone had tightened a rope around his chest. His shoulders slumped, his steps heavy. That familiar darkness he thought he had buried long ago was clawing its way back up. And Hoai Ca noticed instantly. The warmth that used to shine in his eyes was gone, replaced by fear and a hurt he couldn't disguise. His mother had shown up out of nowhere. She sat right in front of him, finally saying all the things she should have said years ago. Words he had longed for, but not like this, not when he had finally made peace with her absence. The timing felt cruel. Their conversation lasted only minutes, but it was enough. Enough to rip open every wound Hung had fought to close. He told her not to come back. 5 simple words, but they hit like a hammer. It felt like cutting the final thread that connected them as family. Hoai Ca understood why he said it, but she also saw how raw his heart still was. She knew that when pain takes the wheel, logic disappears. She saw the battle raging inside him, anger burning on one side, guilt forming on the other. Because deep down, no matter what happened, she was still his mother. But forgiveness wasn't something he could give right now. The trauma she caused wasn't small. Her sudden return was like a tornado tearing into the life he worked so hard to rebuild. And buried underneath his anger was one fear that terrified him the most. If his mother was back, would she hurt Hoai Ca too? Hung remembered too well the kind of woman she used to be, obsessed with money and social status, always looking down on others. The kind of mother who would never approve of him marrying someone without wealth or a powerful family. So what was she really back for? An apology, or to destroy everything again? Hung's mind was a mess. Fear, rage, confusion, and a constant dread that he might lose everything he finally had. Hoai Ca didn't rush him. She didn't push him to forgive. She just stood softly beside him, wanting him to think clearly before making choices he couldn't take back. Because once family ties are broken, even regret can't fix them. In the end, they both agreed to pause the chaos just for a moment. The storm of the past was still out there, but they refused to let it poison the present. To ground themselves, they chose to do something simple. Cook lunch together, then visit Tony later that afternoon. Tony was like family to them, a kid they deeply cared for. Winter was coming soon, and they needed to check if he had enough clothes, blankets, school supplies, the small things that actually define love. And beneath that everyday routine was one unspoken truth they both believed in. Happiness must be defended from cold weather and from the past. When they stepped into the kitchen, their eyes met for half a second. A quiet moment where no words were needed. They both understood what the other was thinking. This wasn't over. His mother would be back. And next time, the fight might get brutal. Hung wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was protecting the life he built with Hoai Ca, the home where he finally felt safe, the family he chose. He would not let the past swallow them whole again. As they washed vegetables and prepared the rice cooker, Hung's hands shook slightly, not from exhaustion, but from fear. He couldn't shake the thought that if he left for his business trip soon, Hoai Ca might be vulnerable, that his mother could show up again and turn everything upside down. What if she tried to take away the one person who made him feel alive? What if her return meant more trouble than he could ever expect? Hoai Ca saw that fear. She didn't call it out, didn't make him talk. She simply reached out and gently brushed her hand against his, letting him know he wasn't alone in this fight. They didn't talk about forgiveness anymore. They didn't talk about blame. They just focused on the sound of boiling water, the knife tapping on the cutting board, the tiny pieces of normal life that kept them steady. Because sometimes survival isn't loud. Sometimes it's just choosing to stay together, even when the world tries to pull you apart. The afternoon sun slowly filled the kitchen through the window, warming their backs as they worked side by side. For a while they let silence do the healing, but deep in their hearts, they were both preparing for what was to come. They didn't know when she would show up again. They didn't know what she would demand. They only knew one thing: the storm hasn't passed. It's just circling back. And when it hits again, their love will be put to the ultimate test. After the tense confrontation with Hoai Ca, Hung thought everything might finally settle down for a moment. He told himself they'd cook a simple meal together, then visit Tony later that afternoon, just to breathe a little, just to pretend life was normal again. He wanted a few hours to forget the chaos brought back by the mother he had spent years avoiding. But just as he stepped toward the kitchen, his phone rang. He didn't even need to hear the ringtone. The name flashing on the screen made him freeze. Ma. It had been a long time since Man last called. They used to be as close as brothers, but once trouble hit Hung's family, the distance between them grew wider and heavier. Too many unspoken things, too many wounds nobody wanted to peel open again. So the timing of this call, it felt wrong, like a sign, like something dark was slowly approaching. Hung stared at the name for a moment, then finally answered. It took only a few sentences for his expression to shift completely. Man wanted to meet. He said it was urgent, and it had to do with Hung's mother. The tone in Man's voice, low, strained, uneasy, told Hung this wasn't just a casual update. There was weight behind it. Fear, even. Once again, his past, the very thing he'd buried, was clawing him back into the nightmare. Hung didn't want to go, but he also knew he didn't have a choice. He took a slow breath and agreed. Hoai Ca watched him put on his jacket. She didn't try to stop him. She could see in his eyes that this was a battle only he could face. But her heart pulsed with worry as his footsteps faded outside. Hanoi that day felt colder than usual. The sky was gray and heavy, and a sharp winter breeze scraped against Hung's skin. The streets seemed quieter, almost as if the whole city understood the weight on his shoulders. The cafe where they planned to meet was one he knew well, a corner spot where he and Man once spent countless hours talking about dreams, life, everything. It had been a place of trust, a place where truth always found its way out. Today, that same place felt like it was preparing to crush him. When Hung walked in, he saw Mon already sitting in the back far from the windows. Mon's face looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slightly hunched like he hadn't slept in days. That wasn't the Mon he remembered. Something was wrong, very wrong. Hung sat across from him. Before a single word was spoken, he knew whatever he was about to hear, it would change everything. Mon didn't jump straight into the truth. His voice was slow, careful, like each sentence was cutting him from the inside. He explained that he had been seeing Hung's mother for months now. Not socially, not coincidentally, secretly. He told Hung he had seen her many times standing across the street from Hung's house, hiding behind a tree, or a passing crowd clutching her coat tightly as she tried not to be noticed. She watched Hung from afar, her eyes full of longing, fear, and guilt. Every time Mon saw her, he was torn. Should he call Hung or respect her silence? Each moment he decided he would speak up, she begged him not to. She didn't want to disturb Hung's life. She didn't want to show up and cause more pain. She didn't even believe she deserved to be near him anymore. Hung listened, his jaw tightening, his hands growing colder. But Mon wasn't done. He swallowed hard before revealing what truly mattered, the part that hit Hung with the force of a truck. All these years, Hung believed his mother abandoned him for wealth, that she walked away to chase a luxurious life without caring how broken he became. But the truth wasn't even close to that. She left because she had been pushed into a corner, threatened, manipulated, trapped in a situation far more terrifying than Hung ever imagined. And in the end, the only way she knew to shield her son was to disappear, to become the monster in his memories. If that's what it took to keep him safe, she sacrificed their relationship to save his life. Hung blinked, trying to understand. His chest felt tight. It didn't make sense, and yet it did. It explained everything he refused to question. For years she lived with that guilt, choosing to suffer alone rather than drag him into danger. She checked on him from a distance. She made sure he had school fees. She sent help through others. She kept her love hidden so Hung would never know where it came from. She wasn't running away from him. She was running for him. Hung didn't speak. He didn't even breathe properly, because the anger he carried for so long. What if it had been aimed at the wrong truth? Mon continued saying that recently, when his mother learned Hung was getting married and settling down. She finally found the courage to come forward, to try to explain, to apologize, not to earn forgiveness, but simply to let him know she never stopped being his mother. Every word dug deeper into Hung's heart. The cafe noise faded into nothing. All he could hear was his own pulse hammering in his ears. He thought abandoning his mother was justice, payback. But now, he wasn't sure anymore. A woman suffering alone with regret. A son drowning in hatred based on only half the truth. What a cruel story fate had written for them. And then, as if the pain hadn't been enough, Mon revealed one more truth. The truth that shattered what was left of Hung's composure. Her health was failing. Badly. The years of anxiety and heartbreak had pushed her body to the edge. She didn't know how much longer she had left. That's why she came back. That's why she took the risk of facing his rejection. She just wanted to see her son's face once more, before time stole that chance forever. Hung's lips parted, but no sound came out. His entire body trembled. He wasn't prepared for this. He wasn't ready to feel anything other than hatred. And now someone was telling him that if he didn't act soon, he would regret it for the rest of his life. The weight of that possibility crushed him. How do you forgive someone you never truly understood? How do you fix something broken for so long? You forgot what whole felt like. He couldn't answer that. Not yet. But as he sat there silent and shaking, one thing became painfully clear. He could no longer hide behind anger. The truth had opened a door he couldn't close anymore. The small rundown rental room sat deep inside a damp alley, barely holding itself together. Hung's mother, Mrs. An, sat motionless at the wobbly wooden table, staring blankly at the chipped surface as if it were the only thing anchoring her to this world. The dim yellow light above flickered and hummed, casting tired shadows over her worn-out face. Deep wrinkles carved by years of guilt and exhaustion appeared sharper under the lamp, reminding her that time had not been merciful. Her thin coat was no match for the cold air seeping through the cracked window. Still, the cold wasn't what made her shiver. What made her tremble was the memory of the conversation she had forced upon herself earlier that day, standing in front of her son, trying to speak, trying to breathe through the weight of every mistake she ever made. She never wanted to see that look in his eyes again. For decades, she carried the image of Hung as a gentle boy with soft eyes and a warm smile, eyes that once looked at her like she was his entire world. But this morning, those same eyes were sharp with resentment, wounded and furious. His stare sliced straight through her like a blade sharpened by years of abandonment. He had spoken words she thought she was prepared for. She had replayed every worst-case scenario in her head before coming. But no matter how much she braced herself, nothing could lessen the sting of hearing the rejection from the child she had once vowed to protect at all costs. She pressed a hand against her chest, feeling her heart thumping painfully. Half panic, half regret, and a terrible fear that she might not have much time left to make any of this right. The wind howled through the broken window frame, rattling it with a screech. The room groaned like an old ship lost at sea, tired, unsteady, waiting to collapse. Everything inside the room felt abandoned, left behind. Just like her, she had spent the entire afternoon replaying Hung's words in her mind. The anger in his voice, the disappointment, the disbelief, his firm stance telling her not to come back. It echoed through her skull until it hurt to think, breathe, exist. Part of her wanted to accept that command, to leave him alone forever because he clearly wanted nothing to do with her. But another part of her, the part that kept her alive, refused to surrender. She refused to believe his heart was truly closed. Buried under the anger, she still saw traces of the boy who once clung to her hand at school gates, the little kid who couldn't sleep without hugging her arm. He was still in there somewhere, trapped beneath layers of pain that she helped create. Tears formed, but she wiped them away quickly, almost aggressively. Crying wouldn't fix anything. Regret wouldn't save her. If she was running out of time, she needed to use what remained of it wisely. She looked around the small shadow-filled room, the sagging ceiling, the peeling paint, the cold concrete floor. It wasn't much. It wasn't home. But it was where she had spent her recent nights, praying for courage to face her son again. It was here she practiced what she would say, every sentence collapsing into silence because no words felt good enough. And yet, she had to try again. No matter how painful this morning was, she couldn't let it be the last time she saw him. She had one more chance, one more attempt to reach him. She rested both palms slowly on the table, breathing through the ache in her ribcage. She had made many mistakes, unforgivable ones, some would say, but her love for him, had always been real. It didn't matter that the world never saw it. It didn't matter that Hung never understood it. Love hidden is still love. It just gets misjudged, buried, twisted beyond recognition. "What kind of mother am I?" she whispered to no one. "A terrible one? A coward? A woman who abandoned her child? Or a mother who did whatever she had to do, even when every choice caused pain?" The truth was messy. No version of her story made her sound like a hero. But she didn't need him to praise her. She just wanted him to listen, to understand even a little, to know she didn't walk away because she stopped loving him. She walked away because she loved him too much to let him get dragged into the nightmare that swallowed her life. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. She knew Hung wouldn't soften if she tried to speak to him alone again. His walls were too high, his anger too fresh. But there was someone else. Someone he trusted more than anyone. Hoai Ca, the girl who now stood beside Hung. The girl whose presence seemed to bring him peace, something Mrs. An had failed to do for years. When she looked into Hoai Ca's eyes earlier, she saw hesitation. Yes, but she also saw empathy. And maybe, just maybe, a piece of the heart Hung lost. If Hoai Ca understood, perhaps she could help Hung see the truth. Mrs. An couldn't do this alone anymore. She turned to the cracked mirror leaning against the wall. Her reflection startled, her hair grayer than she remembered, shoulders, thinner skin, loose around her bones. Her illness had progressed faster than expected. She had ignored the doctors long enough. She knew her days were numbered, though she didn't say it out loud, as if silence could slow the inevitable. She touched her cheeks, trying to rub life into her face. She wanted to look strong, not pitiful, not weak, at least not before she told them everything. Night descended, outside streetlights flickering faintly in the alley. A thin chill crept deeper into the room. She slowly stood up, her legs trembling beneath her weight. Every movement felt like lifting 1,000 regrets. She shuffled to the window and watched the city lights blur behind the rising fog. She didn't know how many sunsets she had left, but tomorrow had to count. She whispered a promise into the darkness. "I will see him again. I will make him hear me, even if he yelled, even if he turned away again, even if she had to kneel before him." She would not break her final vow as a mother. Tomorrow she would go to him once more, not to beg forgiveness, but to finally tell him the truth he deserved to know. Before her body gave up, before her time ended, before regret became the only thing left of her. The wind rattled the window again, and she closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her like a sad lullaby. She wanted to sleep. She wanted rest. But her mind was too loud. She pictured Hung's back as he walked away earlier, stiff, angry, shaking slightly. He hadn't even turned around. She wondered if he paused once he was out of sight. She wondered if he regretted speaking so harshly, or if he felt nothing at all. That thought stabbed her harder than any illness. "No," she murmured. "He still feels. I know he does. If he truly didn't care, there wouldn't have been fire in his eyes. There wouldn't have been pain in his voice. Hate was only love, burned and scarred beyond recognition." She clung to that belief like a final lifeline. She sat on the edge of the thin mattress in the corner, pulling a rough blanket around her shoulders. The ache in her chest pulsed again, tighter this time. She pressed a hand there, eyes shut tight, breathing through the wave of dizziness. Doctors had warned her months ago, stress and overexertion could accelerate the decline. But how could she avoid stress when the one person she lived for refused to look at her as anything other than a ghost of disappointment? She forced her breathing to slow. Her voice came out as a whisper, fragile but determined. Just one more chance. Give me one more chance. The room fell silent, except for the distant noise of motorcycles and muffled voices from the alley. Life continued outside, indifferent to her silent battles. She knew sleep wouldn't come easy tonight, not with her heart caught between fear and hope. But she would close her eyes anyway and gather whatever strength tomorrow would require, because tomorrow, her fight wasn't with the past anymore. It was with whatever future she could still build, even if it was only one day long. For Hung, always. For Hung. She laid down slowly, staring at the fragile ceiling, afraid it could collapse at any moment, much like her body. But she smiled through the exhaustion. Tomorrow, she would try again, even if it was the last thing she ever did.